Please listen carefully.
Hello and welcome to the Film Revere Podcast, episode number 16. This week brought to you by Audible. I'm your host, Zach Hamilton. Our guest for this episode is actor Ronnie Gene Blevins. Ronnie recently appeared alongside Bruce Willis in the crime drama Death Wish. He will also be making his first appearance in HBO's critically acclaimed series Westworld, starting this May. But first, it's time for a quick commercial break. Alright guys and gals, are you like me and want something more than music to listen to during your morning commute? Maybe you want to start reading more, but don't have the time to sit down and open a book. Well, for people on the go, there's Audible. Audible offers over 180,000 audiobooks to listen to on your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. This week, Audible is giving Film Revere podcast listeners a slammin' deal. Go to audibletrial.com/FRpodcast for a free 30-day trial and, more importantly, get a free audiobook. Once again, go to audibletrial.com/FRpodcast. That's audibletrial.com/FRpodcast. Thanks again to Audible for their support, and thank you, listeners. Now, back to the show. Well, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today, Ronnie.
Thank you, brother. I really, really appreciate you having me, man. It's always nice when someone wants to talk to me.
Oh, exactly, yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, you got a lot of really huge, awesome projects coming up. I mean, and again, this is not a new thing for you, as we'll talk about in the show.
Yeah, for sure. I feel blessed in that regard. You know, it's there's always seems to be something interesting around the corner, even though there's always peaks and valleys. But I have been blessed with with fairly frequent, interesting work. You know.
Oh yeah. What was your first acting gig? And at that point in time, did you know that acting was just something that you had to do?
No, you're speaking of first, paid acting gig or just in
Let's go with that. Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, now I'm curious. Now you've piqued my interest. What was the unpaid acting gig that you had?
Well, I technically started acting when I was a kid, and I was my parents bought me a video. A VHS video recorder, and I would make movies with my little brother, and they were just like Rocky 6 and just random
yes.
remakes, and of course it wouldn't be like a 3-act structure. It'd be just like a scene or two, and Jesus, I must have been 11 or 12, and he was like 6 or 7. I mean, barely able to function the camera, but back then I didn't think of. I mean, really not until I got into my 20s did I think of acting as any sort of revenue stream. I came from Texas, Houston, Texas, and it was never really introduced to me in that way, or really any way. But I think my fandom and my adoration for movies was really what kind of inspired me to get this camera and start making movies. So I guess technically you could say that I was acting in those films. But I went to school, went to college, and even through college, it was never anything other than what I did growing up for fun. And not until I graduated college and went to work in the workforce for a mutual fund company did even then I didn't realize, oh wait, maybe acting is my calling, but I did realize that whatever I was doing was not going to sustain me because I was just depressed. So I had to just do some real soul searching then, and then I quit that job, and I moved to LA with zero training and really zero idea on whether or not I could act. And knowing no one in LA, I know I'm kind of on a tangent here, but
no, it's interesting. I mean, people want to know this stuff.
Yeah. So I came out here, and I think the biggest attribute I could give myself as a 22-year-old kid coming out to Los Angeles was that I didn't have a lot of expectations for myself.
Okay.
I recognized back then that I didn't really know what I was doing, and this would be a kind of a long journey, and I just didn't have a lot of you hear stories about actors and actresses coming out here and giving themselves a time frame. I didn't do that. I just kind of said, hey, well, let me just go out there and let me learn, and if at any time along the way I'm not into it anymore or want to move back home, then I'll just do that. And because again, I there was no litmus test other than these pseudo movies I was making when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I come out here and I start the studying, and then that affirmed any instincts I had by taking these classes, because of course I do the work, and it turns out that I love the work, and it sustains me long enough to hang in there for the journey of actually learning what I'm doing. And because it took me about a good probably 9-10 years to start working, and my first, so I guess technically my first paid gig would be ER.
Well, that's a good first paid gig right there.
Yeah, it was a great one. I think that was around 2007, so about 11 years now. It was a great one. It was, it was really something. I think it was the last season that it was on, and yeah. So it was a really special thing, because no one was hiring me, so I had the impetus. I wrote a script called American Cowslip, and I partnered up with this other gentleman, Mark David, to direct it. And that was born out of no one hiring me. So I figured, hey, if I write this really interesting script, and maybe I can hire the actors that I'm fans of to come work with me. And so I did that. And we made this thing for about $1 million, and we had Val Kilmer. It was Peter Falk's last movie, Bruce Dern. Just a whole cast of great people. And so what happened was, as we got closer to the date in which we were going to go into production, I kept having to move back that date because I was finally getting hired. So
Yeah.
there must have been something to the universe wanting me to to put in the work before it gave me sort of gratification on its own.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah.
And I love the fact that you talk about not putting a time frame on it, right? We actually recently had a guest on the show, Cress Williams. He plays Black Lightning on the CW, and that was one of the main things that he also said, was that he didn't have a time frame. And again, like you both, ironically enough, you both have like an amazingly steady career, which is something that I actually would really like to talk about. So, you've been steady for about 18 years now. And again, you'd addressed that your first paid role was ER in 2007. But I gotta be honest, it's a huge testament to your skill set as an actor to be always working like that. And I mean, it's kind of just looking real quick on your IMDb, and again, sometimes people add people to things that they may not be involved in, but so far you're looking at over 100 projects since you started that you've been involved in as an actor.
Yeah, well, thank you. I and a lot of that work is, the lion's share of that work has happened in the last 10 years. It's been great. I was able to kind of find a little bit of a niche. I play a lot of outliers, villains, and whatnot, and it's been great, man. It just kind of, I found, like I said, I found a niche, and when I was making American Cowslip, the role that I had written for myself, because I wrote myself as the lead, was this heroin addict. So I grew my hair kind of long, and I kind of created this certain aesthetic, and so really I let the aesthetic that I put together for this movie American Cowslip became that was what it was. And then just kind of, I got the headshots done because that's what I looked like at the time, back in 2006, 2007. And then, thank God, one of my first real agents, a gentleman named Carl Singer, he's the one who really kind of got me working. And he had the impetus to say, wait a minute, now this is something different. This is a guy. You got the slick back hair. Let's try putting you up for these parts. And thank God he did, because that's what I started working on, and it kind of set me on this path of sort of an affinity. I would say that a lot of these casting directors and producers or whatnot, they know me as this guy that can play a certain part. Now, of course, there's an element of the feeling that you talk about getting typecast and getting boxed into a specific type of casting. And I always maintain that, typecast is better than no cast, right?
Oh man, that is amazing. That is perfect.
And even if I always looked at it like, I'll just keep doing this specific role until I come across one of those roles like Peter Sarsgaard in Boys Don't Cry, where it's just such everything fires on all cylinders. And when he really fired in all cylinders in that role, which was a despicable character, then they let him do other things, and I've had a couple of opportunities like that, which were really interesting, dynamic bad guys, and for some really cool directors. And I think it's all on the same upward trajectory of where I want to go. So, I'm happy. I'm proud. I really am. So.
That is so awesome. And, and another thing too, we touched on, the lion's share being done the last 10 years. Right now, as it stands, I mean, I'm looking right now, and again, some of these may be completed, but I'm looking at least almost 10 projects that you're either just finished or are currently involved in. I mean, what kind of strain does that put on your personal life? If with all the scheduling and everything, are you traveling for some of these, or are most of these local?
I would say over half are local, and it's not that bad. It's a lot of it. One of these things maybe I'll leave and do for a week or two, and then and some of it I'll go and do for like a month. But the only real personal life I have is the family life, which exists within my wife and my 19-month-old. And so I made an agreement with my family that if I was going to go out of town for over 10 days, then they would come with me.
Oh, I love that.
So because listen, as nice as it is to be able to be solely focused on the work and be alone when you're in your hotel room and come back to an empty hotel room.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to be said for having that level of focus, but it's really, it does help you, but it's just that much more worth it to be able to come home to your family, specifically at this age with my boy, because he's so young, and I just don't want to be that. I don't want to be that dad who's missing these great opportunities. I mean, these great these moments, because it goes by fast enough as it is, So that's the arrangement. And listen, it's always peaks and valleys, and it always seems to be like it's feast or famine. And the last, like for instance, the last quarter was tough, and I felt like I was away a lot, or we were traveling a lot because. Like I spoke about the arrangement, there's in this quarter, which, it's been slow, which is, that's nice too, because I get to spend all my time home, but then at a certain point that becomes like, okay, let's get back to work.
Definitely. Yeah. It's good to have breaks. I mean, again, it's a little different as a visual effects artist, but I mean, I spent almost a year in a country where I had no family. And that was really tough for me. Again, it's a little different now. You're talking about your wife and your son. But I mean, for me, even still, like just being away from family is difficult. And you're working so hard that sometimes it's easy to forget. But sometimes it's also nice to have those breaks like you talk about. And then get back to work.
Sure.
It kind of helps refocus everything. And speaking of your work, I'd love to talk about Death Wish, which premiered last month and is still in theaters now, and you were cast as the character Joe. Now, before getting into the details of your character, I kind of want to discuss the trailers leading up to the film's release. Were you at all surprised at the fact that your character was so heavily featured in the trailers? Like, you're in every trailer, I think.
Yeah, man, that was super cool. I don't know. I don't know if I was necessarily surprised because that scene um, in which we're talking about that appears in the
Yeah.
trailer was just so cool, and it just you kind of felt like when you were doing it that when I was doing it, I kind of just felt like you get the. I mean, I don't think we're spoiling anything. It's in the trailer, but
Well, we'll talk
he's
about it, but
about
yeah.
to yeah he's about to he's about to. You think he's going to let me off the hook? I'm under this car, and then I say, "You're not going to kill me." And he says, "No, Jack is," and he lets the car fall on me. And no, so it kind of just felt like a trailer moment.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think, so I kind of felt like that. Man, I imagine they're going to use that.
Hmm.
And for more than one reason, also it kind of,
It's a pivotal
it got a
scene.
lot of, yeah, and it also got a lot of critical. The movie itself gets a lot of grief because of the current climate with gun violence and here you got this
Yeah.
vigilante that's going out and so I think that they were probably like, okay, let's not show so much the gun scenes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but to answer your question, I was excited, and I thought it was super cool. I really was. I was honored, and working with Eli was fantastic, and Bruce was fantastic, and and I loved the movie.
Mhm.
It's just not to go on a tangent, but it's one of those things where I believe the criticisms of it were a little unfair and misguided.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that to critique a film and judge a film, just based on a merit. But what a lot of these criticisms were professing was that this was, quote, an NRA propaganda piece,
Oh, jeez.
but all you have to do is really just look at the writer, Joe Carnahan, the sole writer on it, and spend 30 seconds on his Twitter page, and you'll see that this is about the most left guy in
Hmm.
Hollywood. He's incredibly liberal, so it's one thing to give a fair critique of a film, but to presuppose in, intention of a writer and to put such a gross stamp on it as to say this is an NRA propaganda piece. It's just wrong, first of all, because I can tell you that wasn't Joe
Yeah.
Carnahan's intention, and I I can say with almost 100% degree of accuracy that that wasn't Eli's
Yeah.
intention. Eli likes to get in people's faces, and he likes to put shit out there. And if it's subversive and it creates a little dialogue, good. But
Hmm.
and with that said, I see people's point. I do, but I think a lot of people made this point with actually seeing the movie.
Well, and I think the biggest thing for me too is it's like if you're with film, already there's going to be somewhat bias. Again, people like certain critics because they like their viewpoint on things, but at the same point, it still needs to be based in the merit of the actual film. It has to be somewhat analytical of the film, the choices the director made, the cinematographer, or how things are lit, or how the story develops, and things of that nature, the actual aspects of a film. And so when you
Right.
start bringing in other aspects that the film has no control over, that the film, like, to compare the two is a problem. And interestingly enough, as we were talking about this, I was curious because you had mentioned the critics and everything of that nature. This is one of those films where I think the critics were more focused on a different aspect of the film, which was more how the political climate was going, the gun violence, as you mentioned, and maybe not so much about the film. Because if you look right now on Rotten Tomatoes, right, you're dealing with a certain level of disappointment as far as the rating. But if you look at the audience reviews, it's a solid 80%. It is a massive
Right.
difference between the critic response and the people who
Right.
actually went to see it. So that kind of is a testament to what you said about people who actually saw the film were like, I liked it, and like
Right.
it was an
Right.
interesting film. So every once in a while you'll get one of
Right.
those films where it kind of gets maybe potentially panned for the wrong reasons, I think. So,
Right. And I mean, it just seemed a little bit to be sort of a pile on, And sometimes I think that when one guy, maybe or a couple of guys jump out there and they take a certain perspective on a film, it becomes the in vogue thing to do, you
Well,
know?
that or there's pressure. It's like if we don't come out in favor of this, then now people are going to start saying, again, the internet's a very interesting place, and sometimes it can kind of take dark turns. And, realistically, they could be like, well, if we don't get on board with this, then people might think that we're in support of, the things that this guy is saying, even though that has no relevance to the movie. So
Right.
there's a lot of aspects.
Right.
Again, it's a whole story in itself. But I mean, personally, it's an interesting film to me. And I mean, I love Eli. He's an awesome guy. But, I want to kind of get into the details of your character, your role as Joe in Death Wish. And again, we'll let the viewers know, as you had talked about, you didn't want to spoil anything. So at this point, if you have not seen the film, we will be spoiling some things. So just a heads up. Because I want to talk about the scene, in particular, the one that we talked about in the trailer with you about to be killed by Bruce Willis's character, Paul. So your character definitely has a darker role in the film, as he's involved in the death of Paul, Bruce Willis's character, as I said, his wife, Lucy. And so the scene I was referring to earlier that was featured in the trailer is Paul torturing Joe at his place of work at the auto body shop. Joe is severely injured at this point, and Paul is like pouring brake fluid into your wound and has a car hovering over you with a jack, as we mentioned. And again, at this point, Paul believes that you're responsible for the shooting of his wife. And so then at that point, you end up telling him that no, in fact, it was your leader, Knox. And sadly, after this interaction, Bruce Willis has that famous line, "No, Jack is." He drops a jack, crushes you. So now that the audience is caught up, if they were willing to deal with the spoiler, how did you land the role of Joe? And again, also, what was it like being tortured by Bruce Willis?
Oh man, it was really amazing. Yeah, it was an audition. I got the audition in, and funnily enough, this is the truest statement. I had seen about 6 months prior. I had seen a movie called Knock Knock, which Eli Roth directed. It was actually the last film he directed, I believe, before Death Wish, and I watched this film, and something about it just blew me away. I loved it. It was entertaining. It was Keanu Reeves at his best. It was this movie had me on the edge of my seat. So I saw that movie, and I proceeded to watch it a couple more times. And I told my wife, I was like, I remember, and she could tell you this. I said, I am going to work with Eli Roth. I'm
love it.
I'm doing his next film, and I never do that. I'm never the guy that's like, oh, I want to work with this guy. I never like a blowhard. I just kind of had this. It was all inspired by this enthusiasm for my appreciation for Knock Knock, and then it just kind of came. The opportunity came down the pike as I was as my wife was pregnant with my son, and she was, I think, a few days from going into labor.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I did all that in the audition room, and met with Eli and met with Roger Birnbaum and Mary Vanu, who's the casting director on it, who's just first of all, she's one of the great casting directors, and she cast all the cool shit. And is it okay that I'm cussing or no?
We're online. You swear as much as you want.
Okay. And also she's just been so good to me and a champion of mine, and put me in some cool stuff. So, I met with, I auditioned for and met with Eli Roth and Roger Birnbaum and Mary Vanu, and it went my way. And so, so we shot that in Montreal, and then I went to Montreal twice, I believe.
Okay.
It was great. It was great, man, because Eli Roth is cool. I always thought that the great directors, you get great directors who have this. You either have this innate ability to produce, to make a film and put together a film, right? Mm-hmm. Or you have people who make films sort of the same way I got into acting, and it's born out of this fandom and this years of appreciation and love for the movies. So not too different than the way I got into acting. You're this avid consumer of film, right? And it inspires you, and you consume, and it inspires you, consume, and then at a certain point you start to think to yourself, well, how can I be more of an active participant in this process? Wait a minute, maybe I could actually I love films. I mean, could I be in the films? Could I make the films? That's the sense I get from Eli, is that he is such a film buff, and
I love it.
And he loved films his entire life, that I imagine it just became one of those things of like, this is what I have to do. And guys like that, where the enthusiasm came before the art, or the art was inspired by the enthusiasm, those are the guys that turn me on to work with. And you don't get it a lot necessarily, but I certainly got it in Eli. I certainly got it in David Gordon Green, who's just one of the great directors from my perspective. And you know, it's guys like that, and working in films like the ones they direct that always set this standard that I'm eternally chasing, trying to get back to that place creatively, because it's just fun. And then you're on set and you're trying to make the best thing based on this huge reference guide that I have as an actor, and that Eli has as a director, and the reference guide being these years of watching films and loving films, and so you get this energy where we're just kind of geeking out and trying to make it as good as it can be, you know, and that's what I got from Eli, man. Just a kid in a candy shop, total enthusiasm. Give me that any
so
day.
Cool.
You know, give me that any day over a master craftsman who doesn't really show a lot of joy being there. You know what I mean? Because, you know, it's just a different thing. I don't know where I stand with those guys, but with Eli, it's like, man, we're there trying to make some kick-ass art. And then, you know,
and it's like the way you describe it, you know, again, being such a film buff, it's like I think of that scene, you know, that we keep talking about where, you know, your character's crushed in a brutal way. Again, it's Eli Roth. He's not going to be scared of showing anything.
Right.
And it's so intense, but like, I just imagine him on the other side of that camera just kind of like giggling almost at like how cool this turned out, or oh man, like that's so like just the way that you describe it. And those are really cool directors, because you can tell when they're excited. They're not like reserved and you're like, I don't know if they like that or not, because they don't have any other expression except for the one. And with him, I feel like you would definitely know.
Anecdote about that. I was watching some playback, and you know, the actual scene where the car drops and, you know, the head explodes, which, you know, is in the trailer. So I hope I'm not going to get in trouble by saying something that's already out there. I don't imagine that I will.
Oh no, you're fine.
So watching the playback, and you know, and watching the playback, and you can see like Eli is excited, and then one of the producers is like is watching it, and you know, I said, do you think that'll be in the final cut, you know, because it was so graphic? and the producer was like, no man, there's no way. There's just no way. It's just too much. We'll probably show a portion of it and then cut away. And then I was like, interesting, you know, because I know that on the other side, Eli is probably thinking that's going to be in it, you know, and this guy was like, no, you know, but it's fun to have to let the directors think that, you know, that they're going to get there, you know, that it's going to happen. But, you know, I don't think it's going to happen, says the producer. So later on, I said, hey, Eli, man, so do you think that they'll actually show the head explosion, like that scene will actually be in it? And he said, brother, if that has to be the only scene in the movie, it'll be in it. That is the one thing I will fight for. So I was always wondering, like, when it came down, like, wait, well, I wonder how that's going to go, because you had two pretty confident perspectives on whether or not that would actually be in it, and it was, and I'm glad that it was, because it was crazy. It was fun. It's just fun, man.
Well, he would be a director to stick to his guns, man.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. I'm so proud of him. And I don't know if you've seen the trailer for his new film. Forgive me, I know I might have not have said this yet on air, but I am a little sick, and that's why my voice is raspy. So thank you.
No, not a problem at all.
No, his new movie is called The House. The House with
the House with the Wall of Clocks, I think, or something. Or The House with a Wall with a clock in its walls. Oh my gosh, that's hitting me here.
Yeah.
I actually just saw the trailer for that with it's got Jack Black in it as well.
It kind of looks terrific.
I believe.
I think it.
Yeah, no, it's
kind of looks like
he's visionary in a way. Like it looks very unique.
Looks like I think it looks. I can't say enough things about that guy, dude. I just, there's a handful of guys that, I can't deny part of it. It probably has to do with like my excitement for the role, you know what I mean? And, there's a handful of guys that it just, it's like you wish you could work with guys like that just forever. You hear these stories about these actors that are a part of the crew of guys that constantly work with the directors. And I do have that with a couple of guys and one director in particular. But you just want to be a part of that crew that's like, constantly being invited back to be in the film, Sorry, I go off on tangents.
No, I love it because, again, it's definitely a trailer that people need to watch. So we'll definitely leave that in the link dump as well as a trailer featuring your death in the movie that we talked about. But kind of getting on that, and I think this is probably something that would happen when you're playing villainous roles like you tend to. You've died a lot in a lot of your films, and in some cases pretty, violently. And again, kind of happens with villains, but that's also a trait shared with Steve Buscemi. He's died in quite a bit of his films as well, and in unique ways. Is it a strange experience for you being killed in a film, or just in general? I always wondered about that, again, because obviously most of the time, especially with the car scene, you're not actually laying underneath the car and having your head explode, but still, like, just that concept of like dying is, I mean, again, fake, obviously, but still, is that a strange concept for you as an actor, or? I experience a film or a show in two different ways. I do the role, and it's experience. It's bizarre when I'm doing it, for sure, because I think I like to, I like to, I'm about to get killed, so it's more than bizarre. It's like dramatic, and that's what I think brings out the good performances, is truly believing that it's happening. But as it relates to like any sort of like meta awareness post facto of watching the film and making it feel icky, facing my own mortality, I would have to say no. Because after I'm done with it, there's time that goes by. It usually takes a while to come out, and I'm able to just sit there as an audience member and really kind of separate myself from any involvement whatsoever and just watch it as a fan. That's the payoff for me. You get these actors that say that they don't watch themselves. I don't know. I don't get it. I feel like it's I'm a big sports fan. I feel like it's tantamount to an athlete saying that they don't watch tapes. You know what I mean? How can you see your own deficiencies? How can you see your own habits? For years especially I had this thing with my this tension with my lip. And I wouldn't have noticed it. And it's not to say I like everything I do, and Lord knows certain times I'm watching it and I'm like, fuck, what was I doing? Or I felt like I hacked through it. And but you're not
you're not growing when you're not making mistakes. You're growing when you're making the mistakes.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to face it. But all things being equal, when I can watch a movie like Death Wish and watch it and as just a consumer, it's just a good time. And no, I never really. It's not really awkward in that regard. It's definitely awkward when I'm shooting it because I do allow myself to go along for that ride, and I take the belief pill that I'm actually about to die, and it terrifies me when I'm shooting it. But yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, man.
And kind of moving forward, I'd love to touch on what we can. Again, as I said, I don't want to get you in trouble. Everyone knows of NDAs. That's what we've talked about on the show. But I'd like to talk about your role now. Is it Angles or is it Angels, or how do you say that name?
Ingalls. Yeah, for sure. Ingalls.
Ingalls.
Yeah.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah.
Ingalls. Okay. So, were you a fan of the series before being cast on the show?
Total fan. Yeah, total fan. Without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, it's HBO. I'm a fan of most everything they do. I mean, I'm about to get rid of cable and just have HBO go. You know what I mean?
Oh man, that was a lot cheaper.
Yeah, right. Of course, I'll have Netflix and Roku and all that shit. But
of course,
yeah, man, I was a fan. It tripped me out, and I wasn't. I definitely watched it and didn't understand all of it, and went down the many rabbit holes online of trying to work out what it all meant, and yeah, man, I was a total fan. So when they called for season 2 to do a couple of episodes, I was tickled to just. Again, it's like just being able to be involved with something that I'm a fan of is it fires on a few different cylinders. It stokes me as an actor and as an artist, and it gets me off creatively, and as ultimately as a fan. You know what I mean? So. It was great, man. It was great, and the shooting of it was a lot of fun, and I couldn't even imagine what I could tell you about it that I wouldn't be terrified would get me in trouble.
I would be a little bit. I mean, Again, we talk about secrecy. It's getting kind of intense with some of the bigger shows, but it's just exciting to see you in another show. And again, another show that I'm happily already watching. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you in that. Now, again, details of the show needs to remain somewhat hidden, but can you tell us if you'll be playing a villain or a hero, or are you someone that's maybe just walking in that gray area?
I would say that you got me nervous, bro. I mean, listen, I wouldn't.
Well, now I'm nervous for you.
I wouldn't
you
be.
even say
I would
that.
be presumptuous that anyone necessarily cares too much, but just in case, just in case someone from the HBO legal department is listening to the show, I would say that I'm just gonna probably plead the fifth. Maybe that's the best thing to do since I signed the NDA.
Right, okay.
And let me tell you, but maybe this will help soften the blow. I hate that I have to do that because I think that this culture of secrecy is a little blown out of proportion, and there's definitely much bigger things to concern ourselves with. Than being so secretive. I certainly believe in spoilers not being given out, and but the problem exists, and I'm certainly not talking about Westworld, and I'm certainly not not talking about anything, but sometimes what you have is where it becomes a problem is that oftentimes the actors, again, not talking about Westworld, but with the secrecy, oftentimes the actors are kept in the dark. So sometimes you might not even get the other person's lines. Can you imagine that? You just have to know your line.
Well, and I mean, we've with that, and then also we've had Jeremy Palka on the show, who was on Walking Dead, and even he's mentioned, when he found out, like it was very, very quickly, like the next episode, this is when your character is going to be leaving the show because again, they, don't want to potentially have anything leaked information touching on that secrecy culture. But and then you have people like Tom Holland, who's playing Spider-Man right now in the MCU, and it's like he's getting in constant trouble because he constantly is leaking information. So it's like
Is he
stuff that
really?
didn't used to be as
Is
big
he
of a
really?
problem. It has, there have been some articles about like how he keeps leaking information. And so some things potentially
who's
get
this
kept from
guy?
him again. Tom Holland, he's the young actor who's playing Spider-Man right now in Avengers coming up, Infinity War. And he's also in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, poor kid.
So, yeah, and again, like I said, we don't know how much trouble. That's more hearsay. They're articles, whether or not they're true. It's the internet. But again, it's unfortunate because it puts you in that hot seat where it's like, what can I say? And
Right.
But again, like we already knew that it would be touchy with Westworld because again, season 2 is airing here pretty soon. But everyone else will be able to see what's going to actually happen. But I'm curious to see though, man. I'm excited to see you in it first.
Well, thanks, man. And let me just say this one thing, and let me tell you why it gets a little murky, because it gets a little. You got to know context, man. You have to know context because there's things that happen, that aren't just to be taken at face value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And years back ago, I worked on True Blood, and there was a similar situation because, there was I didn't get all the information, and so I was playing this guy that was in jail, and there was a guest director on, and he didn't quite understand why I didn't understand why I wasn't playing this as I was playing a werepanther, and he didn't quite understand why I wasn't given my role a little more, I don't know, I guess werepanther qualities, and
Yeah.
and when everything's all was run and gun, and I explained to him that he seemed a little off put that I didn't know that my guy was a werepanther. So to him, a guest director who's just popping in, it's problematic in a couple of ways because it makes
Yeah.
him think that I'm the lazy actor, and then you have to clarify. I didn't have that information because I wasn't able to read the script,
Yeah.
and a lot of times there's not. Maybe you get the stars that can read a script, and then maybe some of the supporting guys don't read the scripts. So there might be information out there that maybe the stars think is implied, and that some of the supporting actors have, but it's not always assumed, and that information is not always properly given to all the actors. And again, I'm not talking about Westworld or anything. I'm just talking about
Well, yeah, just in general,
the agency and the culture of secrecy in this creative climate, which is totally understandable because everyone, because this information, this era of instant information, and people like to fuck shit up for other people. I get it. So and this is to be protected because these stories are special. I get that, but all I'm saying is that there perhaps could be a little more faith in the actors. So that's my tangent.
Right on. Well, no, and it's definitely appreciated. It's always interesting to hear another perspective, especially with something that is very relevant. We have so many big films and television shows now. I mean, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, especially dealing with the piracy and having episodes coming out before they're supposed to. And then it's like, great, now these are spoiled because the people who would spoil that would see the pirated version. And then now they have all the information. But there's only so much you can do.
And the flip side of it, the flip side of that is my belief that not only is piracy not a victimless crime, but I think it should be in every case taken seriously. What do they say? Executed to the fullest extent of the law. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It should, it's a serious thing. I fucking hate it because it's thievery and it's stealing from artists and it trickles down. You know what I mean? I mean, if you think about it, the entire music industry collapsed because of piracy, and because this fucking idiot comes along with Napster and says music should be free. Hey, fuck off, man! This is a whole business, and this is
No
on
kidding. Yeah.
the backs of the blood, sweat, and tears of the artists. You know what I mean?
And all the people involved. You have engineers, you have people that are in the studio that are helping make that album happen too. So
totally, it's sad, man. Sad.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where it's just like it can affect a film. So a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but dude, it's just like a couple people, or okay, so now people can spoil things as a piracy. But the number one thing, especially with regards to television, is you're seeing like a show like Walking Dead, as we touched on, was I think number one. It was like the most pirated show last year. They did a survey. Game of Thrones was on that list too. I think it was number 2. And the thing is, it affects viewership. Because when something's pirated that many times, people have already seen it. They're not going to then watch it when it airs live or DVR because they're watching it pirated. And so you have a show like Walking Dead where people are getting on it. They're like, oh, the viewership's declining. But I'm like, but look at the symmetry here, or the parallel, I guess, if you will, is that, yes, the viewership's declining, but also in the same year that the viewership declined, it was the most pirated show on television, which has to have some bearing with results to those viewership declines. So it can cause some serious damage. And I'm in the industry. I'm a VFX artist and producer, so I totally, understand the frustration with that. Because again, it's the industry that we're both in. And I love the fact that I have the opportunity to be in it, but at the same time, it's scary when something like that can risk it, and people don't necessarily take it as serious as maybe they should.
Well, exactly, because we have a precedent of an entire industry in the entertainment film that collapsed, right? And with the what do they call it, the democratization of music, whatever the fuck, it's criminality. So it collapsed. And now you get some of it's being made up with these subscription services, but I think in a lot of ways that the collapse of the music industry sort of served as a cautionary tale to the movie business, and
Definitely.
I think that they tried to save. And movies and shows are longer, so it's a lot harder to pirate, and thankfully you get people seem to have more sophisticated palettes with the way they want to watch their films and shows, or maybe I just
true. And a lot of times it's not even that great quality. That's a really annoying thing. It's like, I know myself, and as you're touching, I was like, I want the best possible quality,
right?
And I know that pirating is
especially
not going to be that at
right?
all.
Because you're,
yeah,
that's your game, right?
Yeah.
That's what your visual effects. What exactly do you do?
So when I was recently at a studio working professionally, and I was doing digital compositing, so that's the end of the line stuff. So everything's been done through the pipeline. All the models have been created. Everything's been animated and lit. And then our job is then to put everything into the actual plate that was filmed on set and make it look as though everything was filmed on set, even though a large portion of it may not actually exist at all. So
that's amazing.
It's a tricky thing. But again, it's exactly that. It's every attention to detail to make sure that it's the best quality, down to even regraining. Everything has grain in film and in digital, there's grain. And when you have CG assets that are completely CG, well, there's no grain. So you then have to match meticulously the actual movement, size, and variation of the grain that was in the plate to your assets that you're adding to the scene. Again, that's a very...
right.
detailed explanation, I
gotta ask you a quick question. How the hell did they do that in season 1 with Anthony Hopkins' younger self?
Of Westworld? Oh man,
how did that not blow everyone's mind?
Yeah, it's one of these things. It's becoming a big deal with, it's either digital de-aging, right? Where they're doing digital makeup to then affect the actual character. But then also you have the aspect of digital doubles, which we actually talked about that on, I believe, episode 14 of the show. We had a comp supervisor for Logan on the show, and he talked about the incredible amount of work they had to do with recreating X-24 and also Hugh Jackman's Old Man Logan. They had to they made complete doubles of both of them, head to toe. And so they were then actually implementing these digital heads onto completely different actors so that they would be able to have them be in the same scene. So again, back in the day, it used to be you just film them kind of like on a locked camera and it looks like they're engaging. But at this point, like, yeah, the camera moving and you have, obviously it's not in a green screen, it's not a locked camera. So you have to actually do this in post. But again, that was one of those things. I don't think people realize that either. I think it's not as common, I think, unless it's like covered in the news that people are just like, oh man, that's crazy, because it is an interesting concept. Again, it could be a digital de-aging, or it could have just been a digital head that was then placed on a different actor.
But that's like, it's mind blowing. You can have like an actor just stay the same age. Hey, you know what? We want to use you, Jack, but you know what? We want Jack Nicholson circa 1986.
It's happening all the time now. It really is. I mean, it's even happened in the Marvel movies. You had a young Robert Downey Jr., where they did digital de-aging. They also did it with the character, I believe her name is Peggy, and I hope I'm not getting in trouble on that and getting that wrong, but it was Steve Rogers, Captain America's Flame, when he sees her and she's old. What they did is they actually filmed an old woman in the same hospital bed, but then they also filmed the actress performing the scenes, and then they used pieces of the old woman's actual face and then digitally implemented them into the actress's face so that it made her look older. And the interesting thing about that is when you're dealing with on-set prosthetics or practical effects makeup, it can cause restrictions in an actor's performance. They can only move their mouth so many ways, or they can only raise their eyebrows a certain height before it starts causing issues. And when you do it digitally, you're able to capture the entire movement of an actor's face because there's no makeup. There's just dots on their face. So it kind of adds that extra element when done properly. But I mean, even in Guardians of the Galaxy, you had a young Kurt Russell as well. So it's definitely becoming more it used to be, and this is kind of interesting too, it used to be very taboo. There were actual visual effects studios that a lot of people didn't even know existed because of the fact that they weren't really allowed to publicize that they were digitally touching up actors and actresses. And again, now that it's become more of a mainstream thing with digital de-aging, like I can guarantee you right now, and we're not speaking at any studio specifically, but given my experience, almost every single plate with an actor or actress during the clean plating phase where they're trying to get everything ready for visual effects, typically part of that clean plating is digital de-aging. And again, not to a heavy extent, but it could just be like digital makeup, essentially, as I think would be a better term for it. So they kind of get rid of some of the wrinkles or maybe some of the bags in the eyes to make the actor or actress look a little bit better. But it is really common practice now. So
effectively, like an actor could have like a cold sore, a blemish,
100%. I worked on 50 Shades, and that actually happened.
Really?
Yeah, like when I was working on 50 Shades, there were pimples that had to be removed on some of the actors in some cases. So, or like a blemish or something like that, just to make it look that much more appealing to the eye. But again, this is what happens when you have a medium like visual effects that's getting to the point where something like that can be done so quickly. It's like, well, why not do that for everybody at that point? Because it can be done quickly, and it's interesting, man. We're in a whole new age. And unfortunately, and we've talked about that on the show too, is being a visual effects artist has its drawbacks. Again, I love my job, but the drawbacks are it potentially ruins other professions. Again, that happens with evolution. But the people that are in jeopardy, we just talked about digital makeup or literally making someone look older or younger digitally, when that used to be a makeup artist job, or that used to be people who did practical effects makeup. That used to be their job. And again, there's something to be said about it being actually on set and in front of a camera. There are certain qualities you can't recapture, but it does potentially jeopardize those jobs. You have set designers when we're doing all the green screen work. They used to actually make all the sets. So there's a lot of jobs that get put in jeopardy with VFX's progression, but
that's right, man.
It's crazy.
Wow. Crazy. Dude, you're awesome, man. I feel like I'm talking to a buddy or something. This is cool.
Yeah, well,
really fun.
It's great. It's been awesome having you on the show. And, before we end the show, I'd really like to know, what are some upcoming projects that you're involved in that you'd really like to kind of promote here on the show that you're just like really excited and want everyone to know about?
Ooh, oh man, there's a couple that I'm really excited about. You know, Westworld's going to be cool.
Oh yeah.
Without a doubt. I also did this film called The Wave. There's a few things that I'm really proud of, but I'm picking a couple. I did a film called The Wave, which is this totally mind-bending, amazing story with Justin Long and Tommy Flanagan and Donald Faison.
Oh my gosh.
And Bill Sage and a whole group of good people. And the director is this guy named Gil Clavin, and it was written by this guy Carl Lucas. It's just it was like the perfect storm of minds, and it's just the whole film was like this acid trip. And I would based on script alone, I could say that I am so excited for this thing, and it's crazy, man. It deals with I don't even know, man. It's a mind trip, dude, and it's gonna be so good. It's just gonna be so good. I hope.
Oh my gosh, we'll have to keep an eye on that. And if when the trailer pops and everything, we'll definitely have to share that on the account because it sounds interesting. And I mean, Justin Long's awesome as well. Come on, Tommy Flanagan. Let's not kid ourselves here. But
Justin Long is the funniest guy ever, and what a sweetheart too. He is so funny. Yeah, man. So I'm just grateful, man. It's just grateful to be able to do what I love and yeah, man. And I'm always grateful when people want to take the time out to talk to me. And I can tell you now that I am absolutely a fan of you, and I'm gonna go back and listen to all the episodes.
Well, that's a daunting task. The newer ones are a little shorter because they're just more the interview. We kind of went through some reformatting with the show, but definitely appreciated. Well, thanks so much to Ronnie Gene Blevins for joining me on the show today. Again, you can catch his latest film, Death Wish, in theaters now, and his upcoming episodes in Westworld Season 2, starting May 27th for his episodes in particular. Thanks again, seriously, for joining me on the show, Ronnie.
Hey, man, it's been a true honor. It's a good time. Thank you.
Well, that's the end of episode 16 of the Film Revere podcast. Be sure to show your support for the FR podcast by leaving a review on iTunes, Google Play Music, or wherever you happen to listen to the show. Another great way to show your support is by getting a 30-day free trial and audiobook from Audible by going to audibletrial.com/FR podcast. Lastly, next week's 5 questions will feature The Walking Dead and air at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Wednesday, April 25th. Thanks again from all of us here at Film Revered. Have a great week.